So I do a 3-hour seminar for lawyers and cyclists and judges that we're not going to do tonight. But I'm going to try to squash a lot of that into this, and then add some at the beginning and add some at the end. I'm going to talk really fast to try to keep it to 60 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. I called this the law of cycling and walking around with a side of illegal e-motos, because those have been the things that have really captured everyone's attention in the last 12 to 18 months or so. That's if you're looking for me, I'm at ohiobikelawyer.com. You can always send me a note with anything, Steve at ohiobikelawyer.com. So you can always find me there. The bikes that I have an analog bike that is it's a redone independent fabrication that I had painted, and we did a little logo work on it. And then I have an e-bike that is a Bike Friday. That's me from 77 to about 2022 or so. So, we've been doing this a long time. The cards, when you came in, if you picked them up, we have a crash card, and we also have the bike law card. Chris Carville and I tag team a lot of bike cases. Chris is an avid cyclist. He is the slim, aggressive 100-miler, and I'm the bigger, slower, older kind of pedaling guy. So, but he does Kentucky cases and Ohio cases. Chris and I tag team usually bigger cases, and then like big brain damage and fatal crashes, and then cases in Kentucky as well. So we're going to talk about walking and riding and what some of the current issues are. And the big issue to me is, why do cyclists and pedestrians keep dying? And they're dying more often in bigger numbers today than they were a decade and a half ago. And a decade and a half ago, we had seen a drop over several decades to a relatively, not a good number, but a lower number. So if you look at this, this is pedestrian deaths, tracking pedestrian deaths down to about 2008 or 2009, and all of a sudden you see a sharp spike of numbers going up to numbers worse than any other year we've ever had, just in the last year or two. You see the same arc that cyclist deaths have. They started in the 70s. That chart only goes to 1990. In the 70s, they were higher. They came down. Each decade bottomed out around that same time frame, 2009, 2010, and then started firing up again. And so what is it about that 2008, 9, 10 time frame that is causing more and more cyclists to be killed and more pedestrians to be killed? I don't think that there was a remarkable turn in how people started riding bikes in that era, where all of a sudden we started darting in front of cars more than we did in the several decades before that. I don't think we were distracted more and we're riding out into intersections. I don't think we're doing suicide swerves into cars all of a sudden after not doing that for decades. So something else is going on, and whatever is going on is also impacting people walking around, because they're getting hit and killed in bigger and bigger numbers, just as the cyclists are. So, show of hands, anybody have a thought as to what was going on in 2007, 8, 9 that might have contributed? Yeah, there you go. These things are a big one. That's 2008 or so is when I got my first iPhone. And then the smartphone allowed you suddenly not just to make calls from your car, because you could do that for a while before that 2008-9 time frame, but you could also now check menus out online, or find a parking place, or move your maps around, or update your blog, or post something on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever all the other accounts are. You could dance in the car, take a video, and upload it to TikTok. And I don't know if I have it in here, but there's a slide that I use that maps the growth of Facebook and Instagram, and remarkably enough, it looks just like this. It starts around 2008, that it's this big, and it just fires up parallel to the fatal crashes involving cyclists and pedestrians. So there's something going on in the car. Part of it is certainly distraction. the other thing that's going on in cars, if you look at the growth of cars and trucks, you look at a picture of a 70s pickup and an 80s and a 90s and a 2000 and the one we have today, the 70s, 80s pickup they were bigger than a car, but they weren't massive today. I mean, I'm barely taller than the front end of some of the trucks that we see around here. That it adds mass to the vehicle, and it changes the dynamics of the way people move when they're hit by them. If you're hit by a brick wall versus you're hit low and you tend to slide up and you have a higher chance of saving your life. If you're hit flat by a giant pickup truck going at a 30, 40 mile an hour speed, your chances of surviving that are a lot less. So there's a lot of stuff going on that makes us take a look at all this stuff. The law of walking around, where do we start? We go to the Ohio Revised Code. Key provisions people don't think about is that pedestrians have rights. They have the right of way, just as a motorist has the right of way in certain circumstances. The pedestrian has the right of way. In a pedestrian case, it's a little weird because the right of way laws kind of go this way, and you actually have to do a fairly complex math problem in your head to figure out if you're lawfully able to leave the curb and step into a crosswalk. There is a serious math problem that you have to do before you can do that, and we'll talk about that. Crosswalks are important, sidewalks are important. Walking on the road is generally lawful, might be unlawful. Crossing the road is where we see problems. Typically, people crossing the road while they're walking is typically where they get hit, but they also get hit on the berm, they get hit on the sidewalks. It's remarkable how bad we drive cars sometimes, but that's my editorial view. A pedestrian means, it used to say, until last year, it said a pedestrian is a person afoot. That was the sum total definition of a pedestrian. Cases came out where people in crutches who were not technically afoot, or people didn't have feet, or people were riding around in wheelchairs or motorized wheelchairs, or a man pushing his baby in a baby carriage. Is that kid in the baby carriage not a pedestrian because they're not afoot? I mean, it was a weird limiting definition, and the court said, when these cases would come up, that's a weird limiting definition, and they expanded it to include different things. So now the definition of a pedestrian is a person on foot in a motorized or non-motorized wheelchair or using another equivalent device, such as skates or a skateboard. Bicycles not specifically listed. Cases have held that a bicyclist can be a pedestrian in the right circumstances. A pedestrian includes a personal delivery device, which we're going to see more and more of that as Amazon starts getting the robots and bringing us our coffees in the morning, unless the context clearly suggests otherwise. So we have a number of different people that can turn into pedestrians. The second guy shows us the hot button issue in pedestrian law, which is people in cars are always saying the pedestrians are distracted, and that's why they're getting hit, because they're on their phones or they're shooting videos or they're reading. I don't know how often that goes on. People in wheelchairs, people on rollerblades can be pedestrians. Motorized scooters and wheelchairs and skateboards, they can all be fit under the pedestrian laws. I didn't have the bicyclists, but they can certainly fall under there as well. So here's one of the first interesting pedestrian laws. It says, when is a pedestrian, what's the rules when a pedestrian is walking in the roadway? And it says where a sidewalk is provided and its use is practicable, and we'll talk about that in light of our current situation, it shall be unlawful for any pedestrian to walk along or upon an adjacent roadway. So now, the thing we did for the first several thousand years of our existence, which was just walk where we wanted, we've now been limited. You're shoved off the road. If there's a sidewalk, you have to use it. And it's unlawful for you not to use it. But that word practicable is in there. When a sidewalk is provided and its use is practicable. Well, today, many of the sidewalks around here, it's not practicable to use them because you're slopping through a foot of snow or hopping over the 3-foot barriers that the snowplows have left at every intersection. So you could argue that you're it's illegal for you to walk on 73 or some other big road because it's impracticable. It's not practicable for you to use the roadway or use the sidewalk. When a sidewalk is not available, any pedestrian walking along and upon a highway shall walk only on a shoulder as far as practicable from the edge of the roadway. So there's no sidewalk, but if there's a shoulder, you have to use the shoulder. They don't want your dainty pedestrian feet touching the asphalt, where the cars go, so they're going to shove you off the road. Sorry, I'm trapped. There we go. Where neither a sidewalk or shoulder is available, any person walking along or upon a highway shall walk as near as practicable to the outside edge of the roadway, and if on a two-way road, shall only walk on the left side of the roadway. And the left side of the roadway is, the wrong side. So you walk on the right with traffic, but if there's sidewalks available, you can go either way. If there's a berm available or a shoulder, you can be on either side of the street. If there's no sidewalk and no shoulder, you're to walk as near as practicable to the edge, and you're supposed to walk facing traffic. So that's very contrary to what the bicycling laws are. But that's the first part of the pedestrian equation. You got to figure out this practicability angle. And is there a sidewalk? Is there a berm or a shoulder? Where do I walk on these different roads? There is a section 4511.48 that tells you when you give up or yield your rights of way when you're moving around as a pedestrian. Every pedestrian crossing a road at a point other than within a marked crosswalk or within an unmarked crosswalk at an intersection shall yield the right of way to all vehicles, trackless trolleys, blah, blah, blah. So if you're not in the crosswalk, you're not crossing in an intersection, you've got to yield. You can cross. It doesn't say you can't cross. It just says you have to yield to anyone who's moving around in a motor vehicle or other traffic. Any pedestrian crossing a roadway at a point where a pedestrian tunnel or overhead pedestrian crossing has been provided shall yield. I wish we had more of those, but we don't see many of those. Between adjacent intersections at which highway traffic signals are operation, pedestrians shall not cross at any place except in a marked crosswalk. And then no pedestrian shall cross a roadway intersection diagonally. So they don't want you on the road. They don't want you crossing the road outside of the crosswalk. In certain times, they don't want you. You have to yield to traffic, and you're not allowed at all to cross diagonally in traffic. So there's a lot of rules for walking around. So what are some of the issues pedestrians face? Sometimes at crossing, there are no crosswalks. Sometimes the roads are big and fast and wide, and it's difficult to get across. Sometimes there's a long distance between lights or crosswalks. Sometimes there is no sidewalk, or there's an intermittent sidewalk, or there's broken pieces of sidewalk that blend into the next parking area with the humps and hurdles. And so there's a lot of issues for disabled pedestrians. And there's often no facilities for disabled pedestrians. This is Beachmont Avenue near where my old office used to be. Yep, there we go. I do that everywhere. It's not a huge road, but it's 4 lanes, 2 each direction with a center lane. And you see a crosswalk over here, and then you don't see another crosswalk until you get over to this area. So this is a fairly significant, lengthy strip. And if you're working over here somewhere and you want to go to get some Gold Star, you have to come over here, go across, come back. And I encountered that. I took the dog to the car dealer the other day, and we took a walk. And I think I measured almost half a mile between the lights, and it was very chilly. It ended up being a long walk, and we snuck across the middle of the road because there wasn't much traffic and violated the pedestrian law. So that's a reason people do that when they're walking around, and part of that is these giant places with no crossing. sometimes the infrastructure is challenging. This sidewalk, which is in that picture that I just showed you, it stops at the next street. This one has no sidewalk, and you're just kind of rambling around through the front of the buildings that are 10 feet off the road. This one has signs and wires and guy lines. So if you're in a wheelchair or anyone who's not significantly able-bodied, you're likely to encounter some problems trying to walk along here. So again, the pedestrian infrastructure problems present some of the same challenges that bicycle faces when trying to maneuver through some of these same areas. The object of the planning is not to help people get through that aren't in cars. It's to get through the cars, get through as quickly as possible with little thought given to people walking around or people riding around on a bike. We had let me just get this up here so I don't trip on it again. I don't think I'll run out of power in the next hour. We had a $100 million improvement to an area near where we live. And my common joke was, for pedestrians and anyone who's not in a car, there was a line item for a crow's nest for a sniper to make sure they stopped them from entering, because the whole thing, it was parking lots, malls, strip malls, stores, groceries, theaters, beautiful. But if you want to go from this and cross the street, it was a nightmare. And if you're not in a car, if you're on a bike or you're walking around, it's just crazy to try to get around this beautiful area where you can buy things and shop and go see a movie or whatever. So they just give very little use to that. One thing that has come up in recent years, does anyone know what I mean by sneck downs? Have you ever heard of that? So that's I just learned this word recently. It makes sense. A sneck down is it's called a snowy neck down. It's a buildup of snow on a road that has not been flattened, and it tells you how much space cars really need at an intersection. And so if you look at an intersection like this, here's the curb over here. Here's the snow, and here's you can tell where the cars really need to be. And so when you have to walk from here over to here, that's a problem. But if you can build in a concrete area, you've got a turning lane, you can build in a concrete area, you can extend the curb here. The cars can still go. They may not go as fast as they want, but they can still go. Same with the top area where the curb is. You can see how much the snow defines where the cars need to go. And this neck down concept is being used by planners to take a look at where do we really need, how much car space do we really need to have? How much of the space can be devoted to people and not to cars? This is another new exciting advance in pedestrians. You got to pick up your bag flag, and the kids can walk across in the crosswalk with the right-of-way and hope that the cars decide to slow down or stop before they get to them. These huge pedestrian crossings and this is bigger than it looks. It's 150 feet from one side to the other, and you've got 34 seconds to sprint across there so that you don't get in the way of the cars once the light changes. And then we have what I call the Blanche Dubois rule. Is that familiar? Blanche Dubois from on the waterfront, and her famous line is, she has to rely upon the kindness of strangers. And if you're a pedestrian, you have to rely upon the kindness of strangers under the Ohio Revised Code section 451146. This defines your right-of-way when you're in a crosswalk. So you'd think, hey, if I'm in a crosswalk, I got the right-of-way. No, you don't. Because there's when traffic signals are not in place, not in operation, or clearly not assigning the right-of-way, the driver of a vehicle shall yield the right-of-way, slowing down or stopping if needed, blah, 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 to a pedestrian crossing a roadway within a crosswalk when the pedestrian is upon the half of the roadway upon which the vehicle is traveling, or when the pedestrian is approaching so closely from the opposite half as to be in danger. So this is the math problem I was telling you about. If I'm standing on the curb and there's a crosswalk and I want to cross the street, and there it is right here, I now have to do a math problem, because the second section says no pedestrian shall suddenly leave a curb or place of safety and walk or run into the path of a vehicle which is so close as to constitute an immediate hazard. All right, so I'm on the sidewalk, I'm on the curb, I want to go over there, the car is coming, he's 150 feet away, and in my brain, I've analyzed this, and I think he's going 30 miles an hour. Well, now, because I was a math guy, I know that 30 miles an hour is approximately 44 feet a second. And so I know that the car at 150 feet away is about 3+ seconds away from me. So now I've got, let's say, 2 lanes, and then there's the middle, and then there's 2 more lanes I've got to get across. So if I depart now, and he's 150 feet away, coming 44 feet a second, am I now leaving the curb illegally? Am I in immediate danger? Or have I left the curb lawfully? Because my right-of-way only starts when the pedestrian is crossing the roadway within a crosswalk. There's no law right now that says anything about anybody having to yield to you when you're standing there. You have to be lawfully within the crosswalk, and then duties arise on the part of the motorist to yield to you once you're within the crosswalk, but only on your half of the road. Because you got to do the same game when you get to the middle of the road. You now have to look that way. Okay, that guy's 180 feet away, but he's coming at 60 miles an hour. Now we're talking 88 feet a second. So I've got to do the math. Do I have enough time? Am I putting myself in immediate danger? What is his stopping distance at 60 miles an hour? All these things you're supposed to think about. I mean, you're not, but in theory, if you follow what the law says, you can't suddenly leave a curb when the car is so close as to constitute an immediate hazard. Well, if I had a forensic accident reconstruction engineer, an expert witness on cross-examination, he will say, and he'll testify under oath, that the perception reaction time for that motorist coming down the road at 35 miles an hour is 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds. Perception reaction means it takes him 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds to see you in front of him, perceive you, recognize, oh crap, that's a danger, I better do something, and then get his foot on the pedal. That process is 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds, all while he is coming towards you, because your brain can't physically do anything faster than that. So this guy's coming, and he's 3 seconds away. If you step in, it's going to take him 2 seconds to figure out that you're there and he better do something. Is he going to be able to stop that car within that last 1 second? That is the math problem that you're supposed to do while you're trying to establish your right-of-way within the crosswalk. And these pedestrian cases are difficult because the defense, the insurance company for the driver that runs over somebody, they start reading these things, and it's like, well, I think we can make an argument that that person was careless and reckless, stepped out in front of this car when in fact they had plenty of time. We have to hire an expert to do the math and figure it out. We did this in a car crash case recently where a car overtook a bicycle rider and hit him as he was passing. It's like the kid driving the car was 18. The rider was in a coma, had severe brain injury, severe other injuries. And the kid said, he just came right out in front of me. I didn't see him, or whatever, and came out at the last second. And the lane that they were in was 20 feet wide. It was a super wide lane. And there was another 20-foot lane coming towards him. And the only way we were able to do anything with the case was because our client had a little GPS on his bike, and he was tracking his ride. And that GPS sends a signal every second or so, and it records data every second or so. And the data it records is how fast you're going, What's your directional heading, east, west, north, south? What is that? How far was the last point that we took? How long did it take you to get from that point to this point? Are you moving, straight down the road parallel? Are you moving left to right or right to left? All this data we were able to download from his little GPS device. The police saw it, and they ignored it. And they knew what it was, but they ignored it. They took the kid's story within 10 minutes of being there. Our guy was blamed for the crash. They had the major accident unit with the cameras and the surveying equipment. They did all this crap, but they had decided within 10 minutes that our guy was at fault, and they ended up closing the case. The insurance company turned us down when we presented the first letter. Oh, we're not paying you anything. And so we said, that's fine, we'll sue you, and we did. And 2 years later, because we were able to take the GPS and combine that with testimony from the driver who said he agreed he had sped up to a speed over the speed limit. So now we had him speeding. He was passing in an intersection, which is illegal. And then we were able to forensically download the contents of his phone. And it turns out he had a girlfriend who was in Columbus. And he had gone to Dad's business, and Dad had taken their dogs to the business, and Dad didn't want the dogs, so we put the dogs in his Jeep, and he got some papers to take, and he didn't know where he was going, so he had his phone up with the mapping, and he's texting with his girlfriend, and the last text before the crash was, had dogs in car, wanted to show you. And so our theory was he was probably setting up a selfie or going to go on a FaceTime call or something so that the girlfriend could see him in the car with these two big dogs. And that was the timing that from the different bits of data that we were able to get, put everything happening at the same time. So as he's seeing our guy in front of him, he's texting. The dogs, one of them may have been in the front seat. Our guy is slowly moving right to left over 4 or 5 seconds that he had a chance to see because we had the GPS data. We don't have that in a typical pedestrian case, but we're able to go from 0 to almost $2.5 million in that case because we had the data and we had the experts who knew how to use it, put it together. Sorry about the tangent, but that's a crazy case. So what is a crosswalk? There's 2 types of crosswalks in Ohio. The first kind is the one you see all the time. They're painted on the ground. The second kind is an implied or invisible crosswalk. And there is a crosswalk at every place where 2 roads come together. There is a crosswalk. And if it's not painted, doesn't matter. If you take the intersecting lines of the roads, those are crosswalks, and you're allowed to walk there. Police don't know that. A lot of people don't realize that. This is the crosswalk in Springboro here. This is nicely done. It's a big, wide road, but they clearly have the crosswalk outlined. This is a view of a neighborhood near where we live. Each one of these circles is an intersection. I didn't mark them all. None of them have crosswalks painted. Each one of these has 4 crosswalks in each one, but none of them are painted, or 3 or 4, depending on where the intersection is. There's only, I want to say there's only one, and I don't think I got it on here. There's a spot on 8 Mile where there is actually a sidewalk that stops somewhere in the middle of this, and then there is a pedestrian crossing marked. That's the only crosswalk for 2 miles on 8 Mile. But all of these intersecting streets, those are all crosswalks that you're allowed to use as a pedestrian, and you're allowed to cross there just as you would any other crosswalk. So walking around is more complex, I guess, than you might think. And it's actually easier to understand the laws of riding a bike than it is the laws of walking around, because the bike laws pretty much are the same as the car laws by and large. Same roads, same rights, same rules. As long as you're riding a bike on the roadway, the rules of the road, that's that provision down below, all those code sections that are listed, these are the rules, these are the code sections outlining the rules of the road in the revised code are applicable to bicycles whenever you ride your bike on the roadway. So as soon as you cross the white line and get on the roadway, you're in the game. You have to ride with traffic, got to obey stop signs, all the things you do as a motorist, you're supposed to be doing as a cyclist. And there are some special rules as well. In Ohio, the bike is a vehicle under the revised code. That's important. In some states, the bike is not a vehicle. And that gives you more protection as a vehicle than you would in a state where, like Illinois, where you're not. This is a new definition of bicycle that was just amended. Every device, including a motorized bike and electric bike, upon which any person or property may be transported or drawn upon a highway. Used to say, first it said 2 wheels, then it said 3 wheels, front, 2 in the back, 1 in the front. But then we had a case with a guy riding 2 in the front, 1 in the back. We were able to get the definition changed. And then we had a case with a guy who had a 4-wheel bicycle, they called it a Rhodes car, had 2 and 2, and we were able to get it changed for 4 wheels. And then after that, we just said, we don't care how many wheels you have. If you pedal it along, it's a bicycle. It can be a bicycle, except it excludes like toy bikes, like big wheels, into that. We now have new things, electric personal assistive mobility devices and low-speed micro-mobility devices, and any personal delivery service, or that this is going to be the wave of the future when the robots are delivering coffee to us. So, but all of those things are bicycles or vehicles and then the bike definition. I'm sorry, I got the wrong one. Bike is every device other than a device solely used for play as a child that is propelled solely by human power. It has 2 or more wheels, any one of which is more than 14 inches in diameter. So they're trying to exclude toys, and unicycles are not bicycles. So sorry if you're a unicyclist. You're not riding a bike. We had new laws coming. They were effective in June of 2025. It changed. There's 94 different bicycle-related things in the new laws. I'm not going to cover everything. They changed the definition of a bicycle to be a pedal-powered vehicle upon which a human operator sits, including an electric bicycle. Pedestrian was changed from that a natural person afoot to the definition we just discussed. And the roadway definition was changed. If you were in my Bike Law 101 for lawyers and judges, you would be bored for 30 minutes while I talked about the roadway definition, because prior to 2025, it was unhelpful for bicyclists. So roadway means that portion of the highway improved, ordinarily used for vehicular travel and parking lanes, not including the berm, sidewalk, or shoulder, even if the berm, sidewalk, or shoulder is used by a person operating a bike or other human-powered vehicle. These underlined sections were added, and it makes it clear, I think, that you can use your bike on the berm. You think that would be inherently obvious, but it's not. And there are cases going 14 different directions on whether you can or cannot use your bike on the berm or the road or the shoulder of the road, and whether you have rights or you don't have rights, and what those rights may be, and how those rights may be limited or unlimited. There's all sorts of case law on those things. This just came out where it clearly implies that you can ride your bike on the berm or the shoulder. Hopefully that'll clear up some of the confusion. I think you're still going to be riding with fewer rights than if you were riding your bike on the roadway. When you're on the road, you're clearly in the traffic game. When you're on the berm or shoulder, there's some question about whether what you do at intersections, if you're coming up to a driveway and somebody's backing out, who yields to who in that circumstance. You don't necessarily have the right of way as you would if you were 6 inches over the white line. Now you're in the roadway and you do have the right of way. The right of way means the right to move forward uninterruptedly. So if you're 6 inches to the left of the lane line and you're in the lane, you have the right to move forward without anybody interrupting your flow. If you're on the 6 inches to the right of the lane line and now you're on the berm or the shoulder, you probably don't have the right of way, the same as you would if you were on the left side of the white line. So no case law on that. That's just my interpretation of several different laws. Prior to 2025, we had zero law relative to bike lanes and bicycle infrastructure in the Ohio Revised Code. I used to have a nice slide with the word nada that would spin around and come in to show you exactly what the law says. Now we have a whole series of definitions that are used in the bicycle infrastructure world for bike boxes and two-stage bike boxes and bike lanes and buffered bike lanes and counterflow bike lanes, separated bike lanes. So all of these things are at least listed and defined in the code now. And there was never a clear understanding when somebody painted a green lane next to the road lane that you drive on. Now there's this green bike lane. It just wasn't in the law anywhere. Nobody wrote anything at the state level as to what the rights are for people. Do bicyclists have to use that lane or not? Are cars allowed to use that lane when they're moving over to turn, or can they park in that lane? At least now they added you can't park on a bicycle lane. So that was a win, for us. Whoopee. The most important bike law has an acronym of AFRAP, which means as far right as practicable. The bicycle is a vehicle, and you can use the roadway, but it's one of the very few vehicles where the state has decided, you can use the roadway, but you can't use all the roadway. We're going to tell you what part of the roadway that you're going to be allowed to use when you decide to get in the game and ride your bike in the road. And the AFRAP law is universal around the country. It's either AFRAP, as far right as practicable, or an FTR is the other acronym for far to the right laws, and they're everywhere. The red states are FTR laws. The green states have what the League of American Bicyclists has called equitable traffic laws, but they have other problems but it's a fairly universal concept that you are supposed to ride over there to the right somewhere. What does Ohio's AFRAP law says? It's 451155. And there's an A, B, and a C section. The A section was the only section for a long time. And that says every person operating a bike or electric bike shall ride as near to the right side of the roadway as practicable, obeying all rules applicable to vehicles, etc. The B section, persons riding bikes shall not ride not more than two abreast in a single lane. So those were the only two sections we had from I started in 1982 until about 2006. And so when we had bike cases, frequently they come up in a crash. The cyclist is injured, the motorist has insurance, the cyclist is making a claim against the motorist, and that's about the only time anybody looked at or dealt with these laws. People weren't given tickets very often for not riding as far to the right as you should, but if you got hurt and you wanted to claim for damages against the motorist's insurance lawyer would say, hey, look at that, there's a law about that. And they'd read that for the first time, and they would say, well, we're not paying you because you were too far to the left. You weren't as far right as practicable. And they would say you weren't as far right as possible, meaning you had to basically be riding on top of the white line in their eyes to be lawfully using the road. And so therefore it's your fault, we're not paying. The WAP, W-A-P defense, we ain't paying. And so if you were riding two abreast, at least you had the option of, my argument was, if you're riding two abreast, you should be able to take the whole lane. And if there's only one of you, you should at least be able to take half the lane as a single rider, because if you were riding with somebody else, you could take the whole lane. It doesn't say that. I made that argument in dozens and dozens of cases, and typically we settled them without generating any bad case law. In 2006, the board of the Ohio Bicycle Federation put together the Better Bicycling Bill, which changed dozens of bicycle-related laws. We'll talk about some of them here in a minute, and I've got to keep my eye on the watch here. We'll try to keep this to an hour-ish. But we added the C section here, which becomes important, because it says this section does not require a person operating a bike to ride at the edge of the roadway when, it is unreasonable or unsafe to do so. Those two buzzwords were the two words that I always used in briefing this before the C-section existed, because to combat this idea that you had to be riding on the white line, I argued that, well, the legislature had to include concepts of safety and reasonableness. They wouldn't impose some rule that would require a cyclist to do something that was unsafe or unreasonable. So there has to be some element of safety and reason in when we're interpreting the A section. And we wrote that into the C section. And then we wrote in things that might require a bicyclist to be away from the edge of the roadway, include, parked cars, moving objects, surface hazards. And then we added this kicker at the bottom, including if the lane is too narrow for the electric bike, and an overtaking vehicle to travel safely side by side within the lane. The too narrow exception, as time went on, that proved to be a very helpful exception, because there's certainly people who would argue quite strongly that you have to have about a 14-foot wide lane in order to put a vehicle and a bike safely side by side. But after we made these changes, you could ride as near to the right side of the road as practicable and not more than two abreast. And then when we started interpreting this C section, we look at something like this, which is a scale drawing that a Florida cyclist who is also a graphic artist did. And you can see the rider. She generously gave the rider 30 or 40 inches from the side of the road. Most people, would take a little more space than that. She drew a 14-foot lane. She allowed the minimum clearance of 3 feet down here, and there's no way this truck and this bike can coexist in a 14-foot lane together lawfully, because the passing distance doesn't permit the truck to do that. And so in Florida, this 14-foot concept is actually adopted in their law, and that is a lane that is too narrow, and so the cyclist doesn't have to ride way over to the right. Another argument I've made is that the far right law was too vague to be enforced. The question for the officer, where is the magic line of practicability? And of course, there is none. And we had the case involving that just the other day, or a year or so ago. This is Bracy Elton. He drives a velomobile. If you've ever seen one of those, it is a four-wheeled, or 3 or 4, I forget, I think 4-wheeled fiberglass coupe that you pedal. And they go very fast on flat land, a little harder to get the muscle to go up the hills. But for someone who is challenged in terms of their ability to stand up and stay upright, this is a very unique thing. And he was riding on this road about in this position, cars lined up behind him, and he got pulled over by the police. And unfortunately, the courts have the final say on some of these things. Cars would pass him from time to time. This was a recreation that we used for trial. He got ticketed for 4511, 55A. He just said operating a bicycle, but the officer who ticketed him pulled him over and said he only wanted to instruct him on the law. Now, Bracy is a PhD scientist at Wright Pat who probably had every element of the bike law memorized the first time he read it. I mean, that's the kind of brain he has. And he carries our little cards, the cards I passed around. He has some of those. He sits on the board of the Bike Federation. He's very much in the know on what the bike rules are. And the officer said, the law says you got to be within 3 feet of the roadway. And he went, officer, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And the officer turned his body cam on around that time, and he and Bracy get into a bit of a match at that point, and he says, that's it, I'm writing you a ticket, and bang, he wrote the ticket. I was like, okay. So we tried the ticket case, and on one of the questions I asked the officer basically was, given your car and the size of Bracy's vehicle and the width of that road, which is only 9.5 feet, you would agree you couldn't coexist in the same lane at the same time. And he agreed, yeah, I couldn't do that. And I thought, haha, we win. The C section says too narrow. He's allowed to ride wherever he wants. And unfortunately, we lost the trial court, and Bracey wanted to appeal it. So we took it up to the Court of Appeals, and we lost there. And there's no rational explanation in a court's opinion for the judge as to why he found against us, and in the Court of Appeals as to why they upheld it. But there's a case out there now that says that the too narrow exception is problematic. So we're going to try to change that. This was another slide that I like to use in these trials to ask the officer, where is the magic line of practicability, so that if I'm riding my bike on this road, I know that if I'm to the left of one of these lines, I'm riding improperly, I'm not close enough to the road for your officers, you, Mr. Officer, whatever your perception of the rule is. I have to be on the right side of one of these lines. Which one is it? And how does my guy know which one you have in your brain, because the law is too vague to tell us that? And of course, they can never answer that, but it doesn't matter if you get the right court for them. Another issue, let me go back here, sorry. I don't know what I hit. Another issue comes up in the door zone, where what's the practical place to be when you're riding your bike on this road and the car door takes up the entire space between the car and the white line, basically. Obviously the safest place is to be behind that car, but car drivers and police officers often don't like to see that. I'm going to skip some of these so we can get into, because it's 7:23 here. Turn signal laws, we do have the ability in Ohio to do this. You can do this for a left turn, or you can do that for a left turn. We actually had to change the law because cases were coming up where cyclists were doing this and police were writing them a ticket for improper signals. So we got that law changed. I just like this, the meme that I found once. It says, always funny when bike guys make hand signals at me. Sorry, bro, don't speak bike nerd. Good luck with whatever. So it's okay. The turn signal, the prohibition, you're not allowed, this comes up a lot with sledding now, but you're not allowed to attach bikes and sleds to vehicles. I call this the Marty McFly rule, because you're not allowed to put your bike onto a car or truck and get pulled along. One thing we see a lot of, and especially in the smaller cities of Ohio, is that the law allows every city to pass their own bike law. And many do, hundreds and hundreds of bike laws. There's 48 separate jurisdictions in Hamilton County and over 70, almost 80 in Cuyahoga County around Cleveland. And each one of those has a city council or a board or something that can pass a bike law. And as long as it's not crazy, goofy, contrary to state law, they can kind of do what they want in these things. And even if they do something crazy, stupid, contrary to state law, somebody has to rise up and file some kind of a lawsuit, or usually it comes up when somebody gets hit. And, we're now reading some goofy law that happens, and we've got to try to work around it or figure out a way to make it work. The municipalities can write laws after 2006. They can't write laws that are fundamentally inconsistent with state traffic laws. So that was another change we had in 2006. If you Google the phrase safe riding regulations for bicycles, that is the phrase. And if you Google that phrase, what I did in researching it, I found that it was a phrase that somebody came up with in a bike or in a law book publishing company. And somebody was sitting in their office, and this law book publishing company was creating a book of laws that a city could buy, and they could use that as a starting point for their own city laws, so they wouldn't have to rewrite every word of every law. They could buy this book, fill in the blanks, everybody passes it and, be done by lunch or whatever. And so somebody wrote safe riding regulations for bicycles, and it was sold in this book, and hundreds of communities around the state purchased the book, adopted that phrase, and I call them the stupid laws because they are often contrary to state law, and it's contrary to the way we do things in Ohio, at least for bicycles. I wrote a piece about that called Safe Riding Regulations for Bicycles, Your Ticket to the Stupid Laws, that you can find on the blog. So what's in the stupid laws? Well, they have mandatory side path and sidewalk laws. And so if you're in a jurisdiction that has this, you are not allowed to ride on the road if there is a sidewalk next to the road. You have to ride on the sidewalk. That is contrary to state law. We went to great lengths in 2006 and prior to that to get inserted into state law, a law that says you can't kick bicyclists off the road. So unless it's a freeway or certain types of fast highways, there's one in Blue Ash and Columbia Parkway in Cincinnati, unless it's something like that with a limited access roadway, you can't kick bicycle riders off the roads. And so when these villages and cities pass these laws, they have mandatory side path sidewalk laws. So if you're hit on a bike on the road because somebody plowed into you from behind, it was entirely their fault, you are now to blame because you were on the road and not following the law. You were riding unlawfully in these places that have this. They have a mandatory bell. There used to be a bell requirement in the state law until 2006. We took that out. There's a mandatory audible signals when passing. No other vehicle has to audibly signal when passing. You must walk your bike through intersections. I'm not sure what that means, but that's in these laws. I think it means when you are riding not on the road, but on a sidewalk and you get to an intersection, you're not allowed to ride into the intersection. You got to walk your bike through the crosswalk. But I don't know because the law is so vague that we encounter these things. You just have to walk your bike through the intersections. You have to, on a sidewalk, you must dismount and walk past a blind person. That may be a smart thing to do. I don't know, but it's not required by state law. 4511.711 is one of the areas where we added a provision that says no local authority may require bicycles to be operated on the sidewalk. These laws were often passed in the late 70s, early 80s, never looked at again. And then they get looked at when somebody gets hurt and killed. And all of us. But if you Google them right now, I'll tell you there's 100 of them out there, at least, around little cities. And we're sitting in one of the cities here. We have a few of those. So in general, bikes can't be banned from Ohio roads. But today, these still local bans are on the books. And cities with the safe riding regulations have all kinds of crazy rules. What's the impact? This is the case I had in Pickerington, Ohio. My fellow was on the road. He got rear-ended by a 90-year-old man who didn't see him. Severe brain injury. And my guy originally was ticketed and blamed for causing the crash, a rear-ender, because he was on the roadway, contrary to Pickerington codified ordinance, which requires bikes to be ridden on the sidewalk when available. So how do we deal with that? Well, what I did in that case was I figured out who the city attorney was. I called the city attorney and I said, hey, look, we got a problem. This law is contrary to state law. I don't think it's valid. I can sue you guys and we can go through a lot of litigation and you can pay some outside counsel tens of thousands of dollars to fight that and lose, or we can do something else. And he agreed to modify the crash report, which and added a line that said, because our laws are contrary to state law, that law is not valid, and it was the driver's fault, which saved us, 2 years of litigation and a bunch of money, and we were able to get the case settled. In Gates Mills is another place where the stupid laws are in place. They have safe riding regulations. They have bike bans on certain roads. They allow the suspension of riding privileges and impounding your bicycle under certain conditions. I wish we could do that with a snap for motorists, but we can't do that. Or we could, but we don't have the wherewithal within our state legislature to do that. So they Gates Mills is a little community in the Cleveland area. You notice they changed the two abreast laws, and motorcycles can ride two abreast, but they took out the bicycle part, and they said persons riding bikes on the roadway shall ride single file. They had bike bans on certain roads at certain times. I won't go through all of these, but they have them posted on their signage. Again, contrary to state law, but if you're in Gates Mills riding two abreast as you are allowed to do under state law, and somebody hits you, they're going to have an argument under the city law that you were riding illegally. Springboro, like I said, has some of these laws. Whenever a usable path for bikes has been provided, bikes shall use the path and not use the street. No person shall ride a bike across or through any intersection involving a through street. Said intersections are to be crossed by walking the bicycle across or through the intersection. I had a case there. My client was on the sidewalk coming to this intersection. It's a pretty big intersection. There's a stop bar. You could see where those are, where the cars are supposed to stop. And in our case, this vehicle was pulled past the stop bar into the intersection. And it makes sense. She pulled up to see cars coming because she wanted to make a right turn on red. And my guy was an engineer who was riding his own bicycle very slowly, which had turn signals, extra lights, and a motorcycle horn. I mean, this thing was decked out to the max. And here's the last 10 seconds or so before the crash. You'll know when the horn blows. That's the bike horn. And then she decided to pull out and hit him. Fortunately, he wasn't injured severely, and he got a ticket because even though he was going 6 miles an hour, he rode his bike into the intersection instead of walking it. If he'd have walked it, he might have got hurt worse, but that's another day. We're hoping to work with Springboro to change some of these things. So we have other things that are problematic today. We have mopeds, we have motorized bicycles. Those are defined in terms of piston displacement and horsepower like combustion engines. And we have our e-bike laws. The e-bike laws in Ohio have a Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Are folks familiar with that? Yes? No? Yay? No? Class 1 is a electric motor, 750 watts or less, and when you're using it, it goes up to 20 miles an hour. But you have to pedal in order to get the juice. Class 2 is the same as Class 1, but it has a throttle, so you don't have to pedal. You can hit the throttle and get the juice, but only up to 20 miles an hour. Class 3 is a pedal bike, but it's got a more wattage, and it goes up to 28 miles an hour. The general rule in Ohio is under the law, Class 1 and Class 2 can be ridden anywhere, sidewalks, bike trails, unless they are specifically banned by the powers that own that area. Class 3 are generally banned from sidewalks and bike trails unless the owner decides to let them in. How do you tell them apart? I don't know. I mean, they look the same. There's supposed to be a sticker on each one. And I guess you tell them apart because the Class 3s are going a lot faster than the Class 1s and 2s. The Class 3s, 28 is a pretty good speed to get to. But you can't, unless you can see the sticker, you can't, if you're, I guess, the trail police are supposed to, keep an eye out for Class 3 bikes and kick them off the trails. Again, it's a nice that we have that, but I don't know how they're going to do that. So this is one of the lightest e-bikes in the world. This is an all-carbon fiber frame. This is a bike I got for Lisa last Christmas, and it's like an envelope. It weighs it feels like it weighs like a sheet of paper, but it's very lightweight. It's got a built-in light. Everything is built in, but it looks like a normal bike. You'd almost not know that was an e-bike. I have two. Mine is I have an analog bike, and I have my Bike Friday, which has also been modified as an e-bike. There is a battery pack under here. There's some more connections over here that connect up, and it's got a special hub in the back that drives. That weighs 50, 60 pounds, and Lisa's weighs 21 or 2 or 3 or something. So mine's an all steel frame. Wasn't designed as an e-bike. It was just designed as a folding touring bike, which it hauls pretty well. But the latest thing, and we'll get through this and then finish up here. The latest problem we're seeing in the bike world is with these, I call e-motos. The manufacturers like to call them e-bikes, but really they are electric motorcycles. They're super fast, they're high powered, often class 2 in that they have a throttle. Sometimes the pedals are just there for making it look like a bicycle. Sometimes the pedals don't even work on the bikes. And they're just fast little electric dirt bikes or little electric motorcycles that have become a real problem in Fort Walton, Walton County, Florida. This was, I think, at the end of last summer. They were impounding bikes and issuing citations. They don't meet the e-bike definitions. The motors are bigger, the top speeds are higher, and they don't meet motorcycle definitions. They don't meet moped definitions. They don't have the safety equipment that is required for meeting those definitions. And so they're basically illegal vehicles. And we've seen a rise in these literally in the last 12 months where the cases all over the world have been kind of blowing up. And as this says, the e-motorcycle law enforcement lags behind. This is out in San Diego. Illegal bikes, e-bikes have been a problem all over the world. Here in the Netherlands, they confiscated 10,000 illegal bikes. And so what we're seeing is the development of new laws. Impoundment is a possibility, and we have difficulties enforcing the law and getting law enforcement to feel that it's a serious enough problem to do something about. So what has happened? Well, here and this was in Ireland, 200 illegal bikes seized. That was in England, and these are kind of the things here. I just literally in today's email, I got a story about this company, a Wired Viper e-bike, and the headline e-bike. This is from their materials. $3,700, 55 miles an hour. It's kind of crazy. 20-inch wheels and fat tires on a 55-mile-an-hour e-motorcycle. So in Ohio, we do have bikes and electric bikes. We do have mopeds and motorized bikes, which have a different set of rules. We have new laws that went into effect in the last couple of years for electric scooters. And I'm not going to go through that at this point because... All right. Other issues that come up for bicyclists include the sidewalk stuff we've talked about, bike trails, especially trail road intersections have been problematic. Bike lanes, hopefully we're going to be able to move this off of the other bike law issues because we have some new laws. Dogs have always been a problem for bicyclists and pedestrians. Municipal liability and immunities, we've got a case that right now where we've sued the city of Springfield on a case. And we filed motions. We did all our discovery, filed motions, and the court took the case in July of 2023. And so it's been 2.5 years, and we haven't gotten past first base because the court has to rule on the motions yet. So these are very contentious and difficult cases when we're trying to figure out how we can pursue a claim against the city. And if we lose the motions, we'll appeal. If they lose the motions, normally the case would go forward, but because they're part of the state, they get to appeal. So I'll be talking to you in 2029, hopefully, and we will then have the case moved into a date that's close to trial. You can always reach me, Steve at OhioBikeLawyer.com. You can call 484-BIKE. If you have a question that comes up later, send me an email. I'm always happy to talk bike. Take the cards on the way out, because I do talk about Ohio and Kentucky bike law, as well as kind of what to do in a crash. I usually go over all that kind of stuff in these things, but again, we don't have 3 hours, so we'll try to get everybody home and fed at a reasonable time. So thank you very much.